Hey everybody, today we are talking about Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. So this is the very first Brandon Sanderson book that I have read, and what's interesting about this is that I have been to 4 of the Dragonsteel conventions that have been mainly based on Brandon Sanderson and his company and his books, but there are also many other artists and authors that are invited to attend this convention as well. It started out pretty small, and this last year it was just amazingly huge, and just so many different authors and artists there that you could meet, and people that you could meet and talk to about their love of the world of Brandon Sanderson, and more. And my husband and I started going when we found out about it 4 years ago, and just it was mostly his thing. Because as you know, I mostly read Asian literature, and this is fantasy, and a lot of the books that I read, even if it is written by Asian authors, not very many of them have been in the fantasy genre. Not that I don't like fantasy. This kind of fantasy is big world stuff. There's huge worlds. He has so many different, Brandon Sanderson specifically has the Cosmere and all the books that are tied into that. And then in addition to that, he also has other series that go together, and there's just a ton of material out there. It's a lot to sink your teeth into. And so I really did want to read something from him, so that finally going to these conventions, I'd be able to understand, at least some of the little jokes and little things that people would say in passing, or when people ask me what's my favorite book, and I'm like, oh, I haven't read any, so I don't know. Now I can say that finally I have read one, and it's Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I actually super loved it. I knew right away from just like when we learned about the secret projects, and when we were able to see the artwork at Dragonsteel at the convention, and we saw how beautiful Howard Lyon's artwork was going to be for this book. AJ and I have had the opportunity to talk with him and meet with him, and almost every single thing we have of him is signed by him, and we were just really excited to see this project come to life and be in our hands. We do actually have the real book, but it's away on a very special safe shelf in the other room that I don't want to get it out. So I read it just on Kindle. The pictures, they're just beautiful. And yeah, anyways, actually talking about the book now. This book is set in a different world. It's still within the Cosmere, a Cosmere novel, but it's on like a different planet. There's a character in it, Hoyd, who I have heard his name several times before, and I also heard him referenced as Cursed Hoyd, and didn't know anything of what that meant, but it is because he is cursed in this book, and maybe he's cursed in other things too, I don't know, but in here he has been cursed by the sorceress, and he ends up being on a ship that Tress ends up getting onto. She lives on the rock, and it is covered by, or surrounded by, the Emerald Sea. And the Duke that is in charge of this island doesn't let anybody who's born there leave. So only the people that can leave are people who come on their ships to bring cargo, and then if anyone has to go on the ship to take cargo somewhere else and then like returns and stuff like that, that's fine. But in other words, Tress basically like can't leave the rock. So she's never had any thoughts to do so until someone that she's very fond of, named Charlie, who happens to be the Duke's son, is having to go on a quest to different islands to find a wife. And this is very sad for Tress and for Charlie. And Charlie tells her, I will make it very impossible for anyone to want to marry me so that I can return to you. And the way that I will show you that I keep my promise is I will send you a cup to every place that I've been to. I will send you a cup from there, because Tress likes to collect cups. And so she was receiving cups, but then there was a stint of several months where she didn't get one, and she knew something was wrong. And the Duke returned with a wife for this other person who was not Charlie. And it turns out that he let Charlie get taken by the sorceress, and like she has him now, and he's not planning to pay any money, any ransom or whatever to get him back. So basically he just gave away his son to the sorceress. When Tress finds this out, she decides that she has to be the one to do something, because Charlie's own dad's not going to do anything, and she realizes that she loves him, and so she's going to do whatever it takes. So she comes up with this plan. She has some people help her, and carefully devises this plan to get herself onto a ship, and it works. And that is where our story really truly takes off and sets sail. The thing that sets us apart from your typical average sailing pirate story is that the water is not water. They are sailing on essentially spores, things that will, when they get wet, they erupt into these crazy vines. And basically, if you're anywhere near that when that happens, you're probably not going to survive, because the vines will probably cut right through you. And so you don't want to be anywhere near the spores with water, where water is involved. The spores, the way they interact with silver is they don't like silver, so that can be a way to protect the ship. So if water gets spilled, or if they're worried about it getting on the spores, if there is silver on the inside the wood on the ship, they'll be protected, because the spores will die and essentially just turn into like dust, powder. Basically, they'll just dry up if they come in contact with silver. And so this is how they've found the ability to travel across different seas. There are different types of spores in different types of seas. The Emerald Sea has more of like a vine-like spore. The Crimson Sea is more of like spikes. It's said to be way more dangerous. And then there's the Midnight Sea, which nobody goes to because it's dark. It's really hard to see. There's said to be monsters from the spores. There's only one tower there, and it's really hard to find, and the tower itself is where the sorceress lives, in the Midnight Sea. So Tress, once she finds all this information out, that she knows she's going to have a long road ahead of her, and she's going to have to somehow figure out how to get the ship to take her where she needs to go, where nobody wants to go, because it's likely going to get you killed. And so because of that, they don't want to go that way. And Tress has to figure out ways to figure out how she can get her and the people on her ship to go to the Midnight Sea to rescue Charlie. So I don't want to say much more about it, because I think it's a great adventure of a book that you can discover all these things for yourself. The way that the spores are detailed from the different seas, the way that Tress interacts with them and has really scary experiences with them, and ways that she has to figure out how can she do such a crazy task that nobody else has ever done before, going to the sorceress and surviving and making it there. It seems impossible, but she's extra determined to make it possible. She meets a lot of really cool people on the way. There's a situation with her first crew that doesn't end super well. The second crew ends up that's where we find Hoyd. We also find some other characters. There is a character who is deaf, who uses this like magical pad that just types out like what he's feeling, or for people to read, and then when they read, it like types the words on there so he can read them, which I think is really cool. There is this girl, Anne, who really, really wants to be a cannon master and shoot off cannons, but her aim is terrible, and so nobody wants her to do it. There is the actual ship. I'm forgetting what they're called, but she's the actual person that like drives the ship. She is also a really fun character who thinks Tress is someone who she's not, and it's really funny. And there is this rat that shows up on one of the ships very early on that actually can speak, and so those because he can speak, Tress decides to save him and keep him close, and so he stays in her room, and she talks to him a lot whenever because at first the crew did not treat her very well, or at least the captain did not, wanted to just throw her overboard and not have her, but they convinced the captain to be easy on her. The captain's super ruthless. Captain Crow, she's very ruthless, doesn't care about people's lives really, just wants to be a pirate. And so we have this, big, great group of characters that have really great interactions with each other. I think every time I was reading it, I was just really intrigued and interested in what was going to happen next. I was excited to see what pictures, what artwork was going to be coming up next, and just that even helps, imagine it even more clearly. There's actually this one segment in the book that I actually really enjoyed, and it technically didn't have anything to directly do with the story. It was just a device to show an example of, here's an example of something to represent an example that's like something that's later coming in the book, and I'm gonna tell it to you by using this story first kind of a situation. I know there's a word for that. A literary device, and helping you advance the story by using a different example, whatever that's called. In this story, there is a man who basically takes care of the sewage. He's like the lowest of the low and servant, and has to deal with people's waste and cleaning and stuff. And he gets fed potatoes, and he really likes potatoes, but then one day they don't have potatoes anymore, and he's really sad. So he goes to try to tell people, how can we get potatoes back? Why don't we have potatoes anymore? I really love potatoes. And the story continues on. I'm not going to tell you how that example ends, but the point is, when I was reading this story, I could imagine everything so clearly in my head. Like, I had a picture of what like where he worked at underground and in the like sewage and everything. I could imagine him staring up high up to the tower, him talking to different people about where the potatoes have gone, and I could imagine him eating the potatoes. I just thought that this part was described so well that, like, when things like that happen in books for me, I just really love those experiences. And it's what raises my rating for the book overall, is if I have experiences where I sit and I just smile and I have to stop reading for a second because I'm like, wow, that was great. I'm really happy that I just read that. That's what happened when I read this little mini story within the story example thing. And I just really appreciated that a lot. And so and of course, the rest of the book is really, I had very, the imagery in my head was very vivid as well for the other parts too. For some reason, that part just got me like thinking, wow. It does make me excited to read more of Brandon Sanderson's works. This one here, I think it's number one and I wasn't doing the secret projects in order. I wasn't planning to do that, but I think this is number one. I think number two is Sunlit Man, maybe. But I really want to read Yumi because of its setting. And so that's the next Brandon Sanderson one that I want to read. And then maybe I'll read the other two secret projects after that. But I'm excited to see how that story is as well, and to see if I want to dive into some of the deeper, bigger worlds of the actual Cosmere, and we'll see. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but reading some of his more kind of one-off things, I think that I could handle those for now, for sure, because I handled Tress really well. So yes, anyways, those are my thoughts on Tress of the Emerald Sea, and let me know what you think if you've read this book. If you've never read any Brandon Sanderson books and you would like to give one a go, I've heard that the Mistborn series is really good to start with, but I would suggest starting with Tress, just because that's what I did and I really liked it. So, and I didn't feel like I was super missing out on a lot of things. There was some terminology in there that I was like, okay, I've heard this before because of like the conventions, but I don't fully know what it means. And so there was a couple of things like that, but it didn't overall did not ruin anything for me for the story. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.